On a quiet Tuesday morning, a man most of America had never heard of picked up his phone and pressed record. He was not a news anchor, he was not a celebrity, he was not the kind of person you would expect to stop the country. But the video he made that morning did exactly that. Within hours, news outlets around the world were playing it. Within a day, millions of people had watched it. And everything about the way he did it told you more about Dolly Parton than any tribute special ever could. His name is Bryan Seaver. He is her nephew. And for more than 20 years, he was the man who kept the world away from her. When Dolly Parton passed away on August 25, 2026, at the age of 80, it was Bryan Seaver who stood in front of a camera, spoke for the family, and delivered the announcement that broke the world's heart. She had asked him personally, years ago, to be the one to tell the world when the time came. He kept his word, and this is the story of what that promise really means, because you need to understand who Bryan Seaver is before you can understand what he did. For more than 2 decades, he served as Dolly Parton's head of security. Think about that job for a second. Dolly Parton was one of the most famous women on planet Earth. She traveled the world, she played stadiums, she walked through crowds everywhere she went. And for 20+ years, every single time she stepped into public, Bryan Seaver was the one watching every door, every face, every hand. He was the last line between Dolly Parton and a world that loved her so much it could sometimes forget she was a real person. He saw the fans who respected her. He saw the ones who got too close. He spent a career reading crowds, spotting trouble, and moving her through chaos so that she could do the only thing she ever wanted to do, which was sing for the people. Now think about what it means that when the end came, the person she chose to speak for her was the man who protected her. Not a publicist, not a record label executive, not a famous friend. The man who guarded her. The man who had spent 25 years keeping her safe. That choice tells you everything about Dolly Parton. She trusted her protector with her final words. She trusted him with her story. In a world of handlers and advisors and yes men, she handed her last message to the person whose job had always been to stand between her and harm. That is not a business decision. That is a family decision. And it tells you something that the headlines missed. Dolly Parton was never just a superstar who had security. She was a woman who had family around her. Real family. The kind that guards your door and then guards your memory. Here is what the world learned from that video. He stood there, on behalf of the Parton and Owens families, and he told the world she was gone. He spoke with the calm of someone who had been preparing for this moment for years, because he had. She had asked him, long before, to do this. She had thought about her own ending, while she was still healthy, still laughing, still writing songs. And she had chosen him. The family's message spoke of faith. It said she was now with Jesus, reunited with the people she loved, including her husband Carl, who had passed away just 17 months earlier. It asked for privacy, and it asked for something else, something that turned into the most touching part of the whole story. Instead of flowers, the family asked people to donate to Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. Think about that. In the middle of the worst moment of their lives, the family of Dolly Parton asked the world to give books to children, not to send flowers that would wilt, to send books that would last. That is the inheritance she left, and Bryan Seaver was the one who delivered it. But let us go deeper, because the security story is bigger than one man and one video. To understand what Bryan Seaver protected, you have to understand the fortress of privacy Dolly Parton built around her real life. She gave the world everything on stage. The jokes, the stories, the sequins, the songs about her childhood, her mama, her coat of many colors. She wrote her whole life into her music and handed it to strangers. But there was one part of her life that she guarded like gold, and nobody guarded it better than her. Her marriage. She met Carl Dean on her very first day in Nashville, 1964, when she was 18 years old and fresh off a bus from the mountains. She married him in 1966 in a small ceremony in Ringgold, Georgia, and then she did something almost impossible in the celebrity world. She kept him out of it. For nearly 60 years, Carl Dean was one of the most private husbands in the history of entertainment. He barely appeared in public with her. He did not do interviews. He did not walk red carpets. He stayed home, in Brentwood, Tennessee, while she conquered the world. The tabloids spent decades trying to get a good picture of him. They barely ever did. That was Dolly Parton's doing. She decided her marriage was sacred, and she put up a wall around it that no camera could climb. Bryan Seaver was a big part of that wall. Every event, every tour, every public moment, the wall had a face, and the face was his. There have been other protectors in her life too, the people who stood between her and the hard edges of fame. Her fans, who showed up at the gates of her home in Brentwood in the days after she died, leaving flowers and signs and prayers. Neighbors who quietly watched over the estate she shared with Carl for decades. The security teams at Dollywood who keep her name and her park safe every single day. The dozens of people who worked behind the scenes of her empire. The ones who knew where she was at all times. The ones who kept the schedule, answered the mail, and made sure that the most approachable superstar in America never got hurt by the crowds that adored her. When you watch the coverage of her death, you see the stars and the songs, but the real story of Dolly Parton includes an army of quiet people who never made the news, and their general, for more than 20 years, was Bryan Seaver. Now here is the part of this story that nobody covered, and it is the part that will stay with you. On August 21st, 4 days before she died, Dolly Parton gave her final interview to People magazine. She was 80 years old. She had been fighting health problems. She had canceled a Las Vegas residency. Doctors had told her to slow down. But when the interviewer came, she laughed in her Tennessee drawl, and she said the words that now read like a letter to the world. "I'm still working. I'm still writing music. I've got too many unfinished dreams." Unfinished dreams. She said that 4 days before the end. She was not done. She did not go gently into that quiet night, as the poem says. She went still planning, still dreaming, still making lists. And the man who guarded her knew it, because he knew her better than almost anyone outside her family. He knew that every day she woke up was a day she wanted to do something for somebody. And when the doctors and the illness finally took that away, his job changed. He stopped guarding her body and started guarding her story. Think about the weight of that final week. She had lost Carl, her husband of nearly 60 years, in March of 2025. She had said publicly that she spent so much time caring for him that she neglected her own health. She mourned him while she kept working, because that is what she always did. She kept going. And then, 17 months after losing the love of her life, she was gone too. The people who knew her best have said the same thing over and over this week. She was ready, not because she wanted to go, but because she had done what she came to do. And the proof is in the man she chose to tell the world. She picked her protector instead of a polished professional, because she wanted the last voice the world heard on her behalf to be a voice of pure loyalty. She wanted the message delivered by someone who loved her, not someone who was paid to spin it. Bryan Seaver delivered her death announcement the way he did everything else for her. Straight, steady, and with total devotion. Here is what the funeral told us too. It was private, family only, no cameras, no television crews, no reporters. The most photographed woman in America had a goodbye that no one was allowed to photograph, because that was the wall again. The same wall that hid Carl Dean for 60 years. The same discipline that kept the sacred parts of her life sacred. She did not want her goodbye to be a spectacle. She wanted it to be a moment for her people, the family, and the longtime friends who had protected her and loved her without ever asking for a headline. The world got the music, the family got the woman, and that is exactly how she wanted it. Let us sit with what that job actually meant, because head of security sounds like a title, and it was so much more than a title. For more than 20 years, Bryan Seaver lived his life a step behind the most famous woman in country music. He went where she went, he saw what she saw. He stood in the wings while she sang for presidents and for coal miners, while she walked through crowds of screaming fans, while she dodged the chaos that follows a global superstar everywhere she goes. He was the first person she saw in the morning at events and the last person watching the door at night. He knew her schedule better than her publicist. He knew the exits of every building she walked into. He knew the faces of the regulars in every crowd, the way a captain knows the sea. That kind of work is not a job, it is a life. And he chose it, and he stayed with it, for more than 2 decades, long after most people would have cashed in and moved on. When you work for a superstar, you get offered money from every direction. Tabloids pay 6 figures for stories, rivals pay for dirt, ghostwriters pay for access. For 20 years, the world would have paid Bryan Seaver handsomely for any detail about the private life of Dolly Parton. He never took the money, he never gave up a single detail. He protected her secrets the way he protected her body, and that is why she trusted him with the last words the world would hear from her family. Think about the scene at her home in the days after she passed. The gates of the Brentwood estate, the house she shared with Carl Dean for decades, became a shrine. Fans drove for hours, sometimes from other states, to stand at the fence and leave flowers and signs and handwritten notes. Some left books, some left photographs. Some just stood there, crying, because they did not know what else to do with the loss. That house, behind those gates, was the most guarded private home in Tennessee. For nearly 60 years, Carl Dean lived behind those gates, and the world barely ever saw him. The gates were the wall. The wall was the marriage, and the man who tended that wall for more than 2 decades was Bryan Seaver. When you understand that, the announcement video makes even more sense. He stood in front of that camera the way he had stood in front of her for 20 years, calm, steady, protective, delivering the message she had asked him to deliver on behalf of the Parton and Owens families. And then he did the thing he always did. He stepped back. He did not seek the spotlight. He did not do interviews. He did not sell his story. He went back behind the wall where he had always been and let the world mourn while the family healed in private. There is a word for what he did, and the word is loyalty. Not the borrowed loyalty of a hired man, but the earned loyalty of family. He was her nephew, her blood, her people from the mountains, and he gave her his working life. He watched over her while she built an empire, and he watched over her while she buried her husband, and he watched over her while she fought her final illness, and he watched over her memory in the hours after she was gone. The video he made was not a press release, it was a promise kept. She had asked him, years ago, to be the one. She had thought about the end while she was still strong, and she had chosen him, the way you choose the person you trust with your life. And when the moment came, he did not falter. He spoke her faith. He spoke her family's love. He asked the world for books instead of flowers, because that was her wish, and he made sure her wish came true, the same way he had made sure her schedule ran, her crowd stayed safe, and her door stayed locked, for 25 years. That is the standard. That is what it looks like when a person gives everything and asks for nothing. And here is the part that should make you stop and think, because it is about all of us. Behind every great public life there is an invisible army. The people who never make the news, the nurses who care, the drivers who wait, the assistants who remember, the security men who watch, the neighbors who keep quiet, the fans who show up, the family who stays. Dolly Parton built her legend in the light, but she lived her life surrounded by people who worked in the dark, and Bryan Seaver was their captain. When the flags were ordered at half-staff, when the tributes played on every channel, when the world said its goodbyes in public, the people closest to her said their goodbyes in private. Behind the wall she had spent her life building. The world got the music, they got the woman. And the keeper of the wall, the man who guarded the gate for more than 2 decades, stood one last time in front of the camera, spoke for his family, honored his aunt, and then went home. That is the story that will never make a documentary. That is the story that matters most. He kept his word. She chose well. And somewhere, beyond the cameras and the crowds and the gates of Brentwood, the queen of country music finally rests, guarded one final time by the man who loved her enough to protect her, in life and in memory, until the very end. That is the truest tribute of all. And it is the one she would have wanted. So tonight, when you see another tribute video, or another recounting of her life story, remember the man in the quiet video who started it all. Bryan Seaver did not ask for attention. He did not write a book. He did not sell an interview. He stood up, spoke for his family, honored his aunt's final wish, and then stepped back into the private world she had always protected. That is the rarest kind of loyalty. In a world where everyone tries to grab the spotlight, he spent his life standing in front of someone else's. He spent 20 years making sure the light could shine on her, and on the darkest morning, he stood in it one last time to do her a final service. The announcement, the privacy, the books instead of flowers, the grace, all of it, exactly the way she would have wanted. She chose well. She always did. And somewhere, on the other side of that quiet wall, guarded one final time by the man who loved her, the queen of country music finally got to rest.